Tananana dere na tare tadani Tananana dere na tare tadani Adadana dere na gare magadama nida sani sa re da nida gare sa dani sa gama Tananana dere na tare tadani
I'm very happy today that we have a wonderful session. You know, the topic is making films and watching films, gender in Hindi cinema. And we have two sections today. One, this is again deals with the gender bias, whatever we have, and they're going to give all the social kind of point of view of this matter. And while afterwards at 4:15 we have Vidya Balan to talk about actually the people who are dealing practically in the films, a female gender bias. So she's going to talk about the challenges of a female actor into the cinema. So now for this session, it's a very special session. Thanks to American culture people. Thank you very much, American Institute. And I invite Rashmi. Rashmi, please come. Somebody video you, don't worry. Come. So we have Rashmi Lamba, and she's the project head of this Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And we have a very important person there. And now Rashmi will elaborate exactly what this session is going to be. Be prepared with your questions. We ask there are going to be question and answer also. And we have very important people. I just mentioned because there's a direct connection with the films with Aruna. So I just mentioned Aruna. We have just meet. I mean, clap for everybody. But she's Aruna Raje, you know, the famous filmmaker and a wonderful teacher in film theories and everything. I'm very happy, Aruna, that you are with us. So it is a social connection and the film connection, and also the sponsor connection, and also an American touch to the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. It's such an honor for us to be here at the 21st PIF, as we call it. And we'd like to thank the team for giving us this very important platform, because it's a very, very important subject, as Dr. Jabbar said. And this presentation is part of a larger study that's being conducted through a grant from the US Consulate. And it's called, Lights, Camera, but Time for Action now to recast gender-compliant Hindi cinema. And the main, apart from the research study and the in-depth research study that the team is doing, and you'll hear more about, it's a very important study that we're very keen to have conversations with everyone, which is why we're here. We want to engage with the audiences, the filmmakers, the content creators, and through that we need to correct what's not right or improve the situation and come up with policy guidelines. So do please, this is a very interactive session. Keep your questions coming. And we'd especially like to thank the US Consulate, because this project is being conducted by the School of Media and Cultural Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai through a grant from the US Consulate in Mumbai. And we're very honored to have them here, and we have the team here. I'm actually the project lead for the engagement and advocacy. We have the project lead and the faculty that's doing the study. So I'd like to start by welcoming Rob Anderson, who is the cultural attaché. And just to tell you all a little more about Rob before he comes on, is he joined the US Consulate in Mumbai in August 2022 as the Cultural Affairs Officer. He oversees the consular, cultural, and educational outreach, including the professional and educational exchange programs. Rob is a career diplomat with previous postings in Armenia, the Netherlands, Uruguay, Nigeria, and Germany. And he was born and raised in Oregon in USA and holds an international development degree from the University of Denver and a BA in business administration from the Oregon State University. But what you'll be really surprised to know is that he speaks Armenian, Dutch, and Spanish and hopes to learn Hindi during his tenure in India. So Rob, may we have you say a few words about your commitment to improve the gender parity. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rashmi, and congratulations, Dr. Patel, for your for pulling this off. I think this it just with the crowds and the interest in the festival this year, I think you're living up to the reputation as this being really one of the premier platforms in India for cinema and for really launching film and filmmakers. So thank you all for coming and attending this session. I'll talk about a little bit about the why for us, why the U.S. consulate is involved in this. So we're based in Mumbai, covering all of Western India, and we've been doing a lot of work on women's economic empowerment, women's empowerment over the years, trying to sort of bridge this gender gap. And this is a priority for us in the United States. Also, when we look at our own cinema and our own film industry in Hollywood, we're grappling with a lot of the same issues that are going to be presented today, And I think we wanted to find some way to, we talk about what we think is happening in Hollywood or in Hindi cinema, but we don't really know until we dig in and see how gender is being portrayed, how women are being portrayed in film. And so that's when we were fortunate to have such a good partner in TIS, who you'll see how they went about it, the methodology, but there's a quantitative element, there's qualitative elements to really understand, and we have a baseline then to see how gender roles are being portrayed in film, and then we know sort of going forward what kinds of interventions, collaborations, how we can link up also maybe between American filmmakers, actors, and Indian filmmakers and actors. Sort of moving ahead. So this is really a baseline, but I think very eye-opening research. So I don't want to talk too much longer because you'll want to hear from them and definitely have questions. But just to say, this is something that the U.S. consulate is very interested in, U.S. government is very interested in, and that we'll continue to follow and continue to promote in India. If you look at women's economic empowerment, for me, I'm here like 6 months, but seeing the trend of women sort of dropping out of the workforce or not joining the workforce in a country that is with such a dynamic economy, with education gains, I think we all have to work together to find out what is going on and to try to tackle that. So we're also interested in those topics at the consulate. So anyway, thank you all very much. Congratulations. Thank you also, Aruna, for being here. And I'll turn it back over to you, Rashmi.
And thank you once again. So, we do have a very well-experienced and talented TIS team here with us, and they definitely are capable of capturing the scene through extensive research and moving conversations to what has to be done about it. So we would like to invite the team. Leading the project is Dr. Lakshmi Lingam, who is a professor and the dean of the School of Media and Cultural Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She's a gender expert, a teacher, researcher, administrator, and trainer. Dr. Lakshmi was a Fulbright Fellow twice, an Indo-Shastri Fellow, and a visiting fellow at the University of Michigan in USA and the Keele University in UK. She's on the governing boards of reputed Indian universities and women's organizations. She is the project director of this current study. And while overseeing the, various parameters that you'll hear about, she's also very, very involved in the engagement and outreach so that we can have some very positive outcomes from this research. So please, Dr. Lakshmi, can you take over from here? And parameters that have been covered. We also have Harmanpreet Kaur with us and Faiz Ullah. So I'll just quickly introduce them because then the session will just flow one after the other. Harmanpreet Kaur is an assistant professor at the school, and she earned her PhD in cinema studies from the School of Arts and Aesthetics at JNU in New Delhi. Her doctoral research analysis and analyzes and charts the journey of alternative films in India from their aesthetics to infrastructures of production, distribution, and exhibition in a certain time period. She has worked with the film team at LXL Ideas on children's films, including some national 3 national award-winning films, and also as a broadcast journalist with Network 18 in Delhi. And her work has been published in Bioscope South Asian Screen Studies and Studies in South Asian Film and Media. And Faiz is an assistant professor as well, and where he teaches courses in media studies, community media, and journalism. Political economy of media work and labor, documentary film, and participatory cultures form his core areas of research work. So it's a very diverse team who've done a lot of work, and over to you. I think Aruna can join later once the presentation's over, because we'll have a conversation with Aruna and also a very interactive session with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you very much. And we appreciate your overwhelming response to be here. While there are very important competing films that you could have gone and watched. Thanks very much, Dr. Jabba Patel-ji. Thanks very much to the friends from US Consulate, Rob and Almitra. And we are very grateful to Aruna ji for agreeing to be part of this panel to respond to what we are seeing in our research. So this is as we said, this is part of a larger project, and the larger project is titled Lights, Camera and Time for Action, Recasting a Gender-Compliant Hindi Cinema. And basically it's a project looking at how do we assess Hindi films from a gender equality lens and identify what are all the key issues that seem to be really missing and that need to be worked on. And for this particular presentation, the structure of this presentation is one where I give the overview of the project and tell you about what are the key observations coming from the quantitative research. Then we have the 3 other qualitative research projects that have been done as part of the larger project, where Harman will be talking about what is it that she heard when she spoke to women scriptwriters, and we also have a presentation on what is it we are hearing from women directors, and the study that was done by Faiz looking at film critiques, which is basically responses from audience to films. So this is what we are going to cover here. There have been many other presentations that we've been doing in many festivals where we covered the quantitative part of the research. Here I'll only browse and tell you a little bit about what we found in the quant part of the research, but we'll spend more time telling you about what are the aspects about making films and viewing films more than what are the films all about. So the larger project, what did we study? We have studied totally 35 films. So 25 films are what we call as box office toppers. And these are films that were theatrical releases in 2019. We chose 10 films which are considered to be women-centric films. These are films where the theme is focused on women or on gender concerns, or the director is a woman, or the entire team is a woman, or the scriptwriters are women. So we've chosen 10 such films from the period, between the period 2013 and 19. And the reason also is that particular last decade, we had 2012 that marked the Nirbhaya case and lot of changes in legislations. And 2017 has been the year of the Me Too movement globally and also nationally. So we wanted to see whether these big discourses happening in the public domain, are they making any differences to the scripts? Are they making any differences to the representations of gender on film? So largely this is a project looking at politics of representation. So in this project then, we looked at where are women, where are men, and where are the LGBTQI characters in films. And the findings, a lot of it is surprising and a lot of it is not so surprising. In the sense, large number of characters in films are played by men. So out of every 10 characters, 7 characters are men and 3 characters are women. Women generally play the role of romantic interests, but never the leads or the co-leads. Largely the leads are men and the co-leads are other men. And in the women-centric films, women are the leads, and they do have co-leads which are women, or they also have co-leads who are LGBTQI or queer characters. We find that box office films are largely outbound, and we keep seeing even the most successful films this particular year and last year have all been war films or very high on misogyny and also violence. So those are all outbound based films, and the women-centric films are very inbound sound, they look at families, they look at relationships, they look at issues of sexuality, and they're also looking at issues to do with what is a women's and gender concern within our lives. Then more men contribute to filmmaking, and this is very interesting data. For every man that you see on the screen, you have about 18 men behind the screen, and for every woman on the screen, there are only 7 women behind the screen. And the women who contribute to filmmaking are only in 4 departments. Typically, they are in the costume and they are in the design sets and dancing and things like that. But the core departments like editing and oh, what's going on here? Okay, fine. So all these things about, editing and sound and cinematography, all these are held by men. We are seeing some women coming in, but largely they are not from the industry. They are from the IT sector. So they are all into VFX and animation. So there are women creeping into the industry from the back end in a different way. So the final report is getting ready. By the end of this month, early March, we'll be releasing the final report. It is going to be out everywhere, and all of you will definitely see what the final report is saying. But we have assessed these 35 films on 19 parameters, 19 parameters. And each parameter, again, has at least 4 to 5 sub-parameters. So we looked at things like caste, we looked at class, we looked at the color of the characters. We then also looked at, is there sexist language? Is there objectification like that? We have 19 parameters. So the rest of the studies which we are presenting here is about script writers and what is it that they are saying. So I call upon Harman to take over from here. And one of our colleagues, Professor Shilpa Fadke, could not come. So she has done research on directors. So Harman will also cover that part. And then Faiz will come after that. So we are absolutely on a roll. And welcome on board.
Hi, everybody. I'll be very briefly taking you through our research on women screenwriters and women directors in Hindi cinema. So, first of all, the question is, why screenwriters and why women screenwriters? So, the premise that I began with was that screenplay and dialogue writers have often been overlooked in India, not just in terms of the visibility in a film's marketing or publicity, but also by the industry itself, where the labor of writing a script or the craft of writing a script is not given its due importance. Of course, there are many exceptions to this, but there is a specific craft of screenwriting which a lot of people tend to not give that much importance to or recognize the value of it. And a lot of it is also due to a changing production culture. So, of course, today there is a lot more focus on having a bound script before a film, but that was not so many years ago. But of course, there are exceptions to this. The screenplay writer imagines the film before anyone else on the film production, and one usually has the tendency to make the director the primary author of the film, but instead I approached it as a much more collaborative process where the screenplay writer occupies a very unique position. Within the contemporary period, more or less in the last 5 to 10 years, Hindi cinema has witnessed several women screenplay writers emerge, telling stories which have a very renewed focus on questions of gender roles in society. They've also focused on very complex and layered characters, both men, women, and queer, with a lot of new perspectives. So I'm looking at their position within a larger male-dominated industry and the pressures that they're facing in it. I engage with all these writers as the authors of their script, their collaborations with both male and female directors and producers to make their stories come to life on screen. And the research was undertaken with the screenwriters that were selected. There were 4 screenwriters, 3 screenwriter directors, and 1 film programmer and screenwriter and screenwriting mentor. All of them were interviewed for this study. And I was very interested in exploring the ways in which women screenwriters enter the industry, ways in which they make, they wade through the industry and get their projects or pitch their projects. So as a part of the interviews, they revealed how they entered the industry. And for a majority of them, what happened was that they switched over from an allied media profession like advertising, like television, journalism, theater, and even direction. This was also possible because they had a very personal interest and investment in the craft of screenwriting, and they wanted to do something beyond the creative outputs in their respective media professions. And it was almost like going a step above what they were already doing in their existing work, and also because the kind of opportunities that were made available to them. So this is a quote from one of my respondents who says that unlike today, where you have one big hit show that opens a lot of doors to you, it wasn't like that back then. Back then, in the sense, at least 15, 20 years ago, there were very clear demarcations between who a television director is, who a film director is, who is a woman director, and who is a male director. So I want to give you a little bit of context to this quote. The screenwriter who I spoke to here, screenwriter director, she wrote for television in the late 90s, early 2000s, and she came out with a very hit show with a very prominent male director as a creative director on board. And also she had a female producer. So that was very interesting how she got her project greenlit. And later on, after she worked on this hit television show, she wanted to switch to films. She wanted to write for films. And it almost took her 10 years to do that. So it was only after 10 years that she ended up writing her first film, as in she wrote several film scripts for the first film that actually got made. So it is very interesting to note that television has always had a number of women writers because there are certain shows and programs that are aimed at women, but that was not so much the case with films. So every screenwriter's journey has been very unique, and it can be observed that out of all the screenwriters that I spoke to, the 7 screenwriters that I spoke to, only one had completed the screenplay writing course from FTI here in Pune, while others had all switched over from other media professions, ranging from advertising to even direction. I missed out on one point in the previous slide. Just want to make a point about how collaborations are really important as well. So I found out that collaborations are really the key to how women find work and stay working in the industry. The kind of collaborations they make with producers, with directors, both male and female, and it depends on who who they sort of really gel with in terms of working, and who respects their work and their inputs and their craft. And of course, it's a lot about luck and timing as well. Here's another quote that I want to read out for you. This screenwriter says that I was told by a leading producer that you can't write about female friends. I remember a few years ago, I wrote a story about war, World War and the Indian participation in it. I mean, there was no way I could get money to make it because nobody will trust me with it. Despite having done so much work, they will trust a new guy to make a war film. So here I want to highlight how one of the major hurdles that women writers face in the industry is pitching their film scripts to producers to get their work taken seriously. And on the other hand, if they are commissioned to write something, then what kind of genres they get commissioned to write due to their gender. It's also very interesting that some writers who've written, very commendable gender-focused stories, they sometimes want to distance the work that they've done, 10, 15 years ago, because it had a very different focus because of the kind of gaze that existed in it. Another quote that I want to read out to you is, it was also suggested that why don't I take a big male star as her co-star? Her co-star is the female lead in this particular film, so that it could get funded and it could see the light of the day. So This is another hurdle that writers face, is to tweak their scripts or multiple drafts to, to change the story based on what producers want them to, and more especially so corporate producers, and hence losing the essence of what the story was intentionally intended to be. So what is all this pointing to? The first is, of course, do we have enough women and queer scriptwriters in the industry, and how do we get there? So one of the ways, of course, is that we definitely need more avenues where everybody can go and learn how to write for the screen. The craft that I spoke about, the skill that is involved, we need more avenues through which both men and women can learn script writing. And also a clear way of representing narratives that focus on women's lives and perspectives is also to have more women writing, but not just them writing, but also make it very lucrative for them. So one of the hurdles that women face is they may have written a script, but it takes a long time for it to get made, and in between, you have to also make ends meet. So the opportunities should be lucrative, and the time that it takes to get a film made, needs to be much lesser. And often what women prefer to do is instead switch to other roles in a film production. So they will switch to being an assistant director, an editor, or so on, because in terms of opportunities and remuneration, it may be a better opportunity. And we also need a lot of women producers to greenlight scripts, because, as I mentioned, several times it happens that they don't get taken seriously by male producers, and they have to change the script to meet their gaze. And more women producers will definitely help to change this scenario. And lastly, it would also be relevant to keep all the harassment policies in place, not just on a film production set or at production houses, but also in the ways in which screenwriters engage with different crew members, different producers in their offices or other private spaces. So it's really important to have policies in place to prevent any kind of harassment that can take place. From here, I'd like to move on to discussing my colleagues' Shilpa and Ithla's study. They spoke to a number of women directors in the industry, and I think it would be some of the issues that I spoke about related to screenwriters sort of carries over to those of the directors. So they took in-depth interviews with around 13 women directors of different generations, and engaged with their own personal stories and the problems that they face in entering the industry and staying within the industry. So, of course, it has to be noted that just like how screenwriters, there's not enough representation of women, it's the same with directors, where the industry is largely male-dominated. However, since 2000, women have sort of increased in number, but still it's really far from any sort of situation of parity. So again, the same question, why women directors? You can also have men who can make gender-sensitive films or feminist films, but what is really important to understand and reiterate here that in cinema, representation matters. Who is writing a film, who is directing, and what kind of experiences are they bringing to their art and to the final film product. It has been noticed that a lot of directors who they spoke to told them about that many years ago, on a film set, there would be less than 10 women most of the time. Today, it has increased, the number has increased to around 40, but still it is less than 25% of a production team or the HODs, which are the head of departments on a film team. So here is a relevant, quote from the study where a director says, a lot of well-known male directors laugh at me because I pay interns. They say, oh, the interns should be grateful. starting from financial things to just mentoring in terms of what kind of stories you want to tell and how. That's why I also seek women as assistants, because 10 years later, they will become filmmakers and they will have a strong voice. So here you can see how the director herself wants to make sure that she is able to mentor the women on her team so that they also go on to make films later on. Another important issue that came up in their study was the usage of the term woman director itself. So a number of women were comfortable with using that term, while a number of women wanted to distance themselves from it because it then puts them in a kind of a box where they can only make certain kind of films. So here is another quote where this director said, "If I have to do a female action film, I'll get a fraction of the amount of a male action film." So it's the film that should get the money and not the gender of the director or star. If you really want to see change, you have to put your money where your mouth is. So a problem that women directors face is that they will not get enough funding for their film, or the film will not see the light of the day because of the gender, or they may get less money to make the film itself. So this is a really important issue that needs to be highlighted when it comes to women directors. And then we come to the question of the female gaze. I'm sure you have heard of this term a lot these days. This is something that we increasingly talk about, not just in a public forum like this, but also within academic space. Is that what is the female gaze, and is it something that is really important to women directors? So let's look at this quote where this director says, "For me, the female gaze is about how the women characters are looked at. I try to write them as well-rounded characters, and I'm not trying to hide their fissures, not running away from exploring the darker side or the more complicated aspects of their lives, whether it is to do with their physical being or their intimate choices or their moral compass. It is also about how much agency that character has, how much the character drives the narrative." So the female gaze is all about centering women's experiences, making their narratives visible, and for creating a more gender equitable society, looking at the heroine's journey, and having a strong focus on female authorship and their agency in the film story, in how the film comes out. So, to conclude, looking at our research on screenwriters, women screenwriters and directors, we feel that to have more women in the industry in these two positions, it will definitely lead to not just increased representation, but also more complex and more heterogeneous narratives on screen. So with that, I will hand over to my colleague Faiz.
So this is the part of cinema that doesn't get talked about as often as the films themselves, and what goes on in the process of making films, who are making films, and so on. So even if you look at film criticism, most of the film criticism is focused on the text itself, or this, what we see on the screen itself. Then there is some, in order of priority, some importance given to people who make films or the industry as such. But one aspect of cinema that often escapes our attention, our scrutiny, are the audiences, right? And this is the entire reason why films get made, so that people can watch films, people can enjoy films, and the industry gets to reproduce in the sense that they make enough profits to make more and more films. But audiences are, I've used a slightly provocative title here, poor audiences, and I mean it in two senses. So poor is, of course, in terms of, very, very literally. So the more research that is done on audiences, the more the motivation to know them. It's primarily because most of this research is market orientation. So market-oriented research, you want to know more about, what the audiences want, what have worked in the past, and so on and so forth. And some product testing also, so you have focus group discussions and so on. But the idea is to extract information from audiences so that they could be targeted better. And this continues even in the digital consumption age, where a lot of our data is extracted by OTT platforms and so on, so that they can predict, so that they can influence audience behavior and serve them the kind of content that might fetch more money. So the idea of knowing audiences is not very innocent. It's to also kind of, the more producers and market researchers get to know you, the more there are chances they'll get something out of your pocket. So that's poor in terms of very literal sense of the word. The other is poor in this way they are imagined by the state, by civil society, by uncivil society also in some ways, that audiences are impressionable, audiences are vulnerable, audiences are they can't tell good from bad, fact from fiction, true from false, and so on and so forth. And therefore, there is a very paternalistic view that exists as to protect the audiences from media harms. And these harms are essentially behavioral effects of media. So the larger imagination is, if people see violence, gratuitous violence on screen, they'll go and reproduce it in their everyday lives and so on, whereas this is not so straightforward. There are media effects, but direct behavioral effects are the least we should be concerned about. So this is the other more metaphorical way in which audiences are thought of, bichari audience, poor audiences, in a different way. So most often we are concerned with media or cinema's effect on the audiences. What do the media do to the people? How if we flip that question and ask, what do people do to the media? So the larger imagination is audience as passive, impressionable, vulnerable, and so on. So censorship is there, and somebody somewhere sits and decides what should be watched, what should not be watched, and PILs are filed in the courts, and so on and so forth. So, but we are very concerned with media's effect on people, but not so much on what people do to the media. But there's enough and more media research which says that as much as media shapes the audiences also shape the media. Audiences are active, right? Active in the first sense, you make choices. You watch what you like, you don't watch what you don't like, right? Active in second sense, you interpret media in very, very different ways. So for those of you who are here watching films in groups, even if you watch the same film, there is great likelihood that your opinions will be divided. Some of you may, even from the same friend group, some of you may like the same film, some of you may have different problems with it. So media doesn't have uniform effect on people. People also bring their knowledge framework, their life experiences, their ideologies, their politics to bear on cinema. And the third is how they talk back to it, and which has become much more prominent today, given the access to internet and social media. So if I don't like anything, I make my mind, I speak my mind, I go online and I write a Twitter thread, or I post something on Instagram calling out the sexism in the film, or any other thing that I didn't like about it. So within this context, we interviewed several young media critics. So these are, when we say critics, usually the figure that one conjures is of a person who's more often an elderly male who's kind of commenting very erudite fashion on high culture and so on. But these are very, very young people who are running Instagram pages, who are making mashup videos, GIFs, etc., podcasts, Instagram groups, and they're commenting on films, commenting on cinema, on aspects that they like and that they don't like. So the important bit about these young people are they are fans. They are audiences who are very committed to popular culture. So they celebrate films, they dress how the stars dress, they kind of use material from the films, dialogues, fashion, etc., etc. But for them, popular culture is also very, very important because that's where the common sense of a particular time of a society gets made, right? So for example, what is romance and courtship like? For the longest time, Hindi films had this trope of, the hero stalking the heroine, and that was considered an acceptable way of expressing your love interest in someone and, getting them to reciprocate. And that's why, resisting these kind of reductionist or damaging representation becomes much, much more important. They use satire a lot. So when I'm saying this, think of pretentious movie reviews, Biswa Kalyan Rath and Kanan Gill. Think of Kusha Kapila and Shrishti Dikshit, Behansplaining, and so on and so forth. So they are kind of also talking in a language, using a register, which is very different from what professional critics use, and making a connect with the younger audiences, their peers. Their reviews themselves, their take on movies themselves are entertaining, and they have, if you've followed some of these people around, their post gets hundreds and thousands of views each. And they play a very important role in formation of communities, so fandoms, subcultures. So there are fan clubs of actors, even directors, and so they follow their work very, very keenly, and they kind of meet online and offline. And they make a critical and feminist vocabulary available. So Herman, for example, mentioned gays, but for example, microaggressions, mansplaining, so taking kind of resources from academic research and applying it how to watch films, Bechdel test, and so on. Young critics look at cinema from a wider perspective. They critique taken for granted representations. So, like for example, critics are interested in cinema, films as discrete products which release every Friday, but they look at more long-term, pervasive, entrenched stereotypes. They advocate for exploration of complexity of everyday lives and messiness of identities. So gender itself as a social construct, they kind of take it apart. What are gender roles and so on? And gender's intersection with caste and other kinds of identities. And feminism also, they have a very nuanced understanding of it, not something that is a fixed ideal or a kind of a defined politics, but also how it plays out in the universe of the film itself. So the three things that come out, key takeaways from this set of research is diverse audiences need access to watch cinema. So most of the time producers say we make these films because the audience demands it, and the audience are primarily, cinema-going audiences are primarily men. We can talk about it later also. Watch themselves in cinema. So the organization that Rashmi is associated with, Gina Davis Institute, one of the key lines is if they can see it, they can be it. So you have to have those resources. Cinema provide you with those kind of resources, and participate in the making of cinema, which is the point that Herman made about participation in the structures of filmmaking. There's very little emphasis on critical media education within and outside formal education. So this came out very, very strongly. So in a culture which is, we're spending 4, 5, 6 hours every day on our mobile phones, watching all kinds of videos and so on, but there is still a kind of a lack that people feel that they don't have how to negotiate with advertising, how to negotiate with sexism, for example, in films and so on. And the final but not all audiences are good. There is also something that scholars have called the nasty audiences. This, kind of involves trolling, organized trolling, and so on and so forth, and how, say, for example, a film like Kabir Singh, where while there is, kind of a lot of criticism of it, there are also sections of audiences that are out defending things that are almost indefensible. So, yeah, thank you. Over to you, Rashmi.
I think there was so much to say, so sorry it's gone a little longer, but I think we have a great conversation lined up for at least 10 minutes with Aruna. Aruna, of course, as you all know, is a critically acclaimed writer, editor, director, and producer. Graduating from the Film Institute of India with a gold medal, she was the first girl technician in the Indian film industry. That's a huge thing that is very, very important for you to know. She was a winner. She's been a winner of 6 national awards. She's been making advertising films, documentaries, and features like Shak, Gehrai, Sitam, which she co-directed and went solo with Rihai, Patita Pavan, Patita Pavani, Bhairavi, Kehdona, and Tum. She has also edited films like Gid and Masoom. Her latest film, Firebrand, produced by Priyanka Chopra, is on Netflix. So I hope you guys have seen it. Actively involved in film education, she has also been a part of the decision-making bodies and teaching in many film schools. She has been the vice president of the FTII Society right here and also vice chairperson of the governing body. Currently, she's part of the academic council there. Passionate about documentaries, she has headed the Indian Documentary Producers Association as president twice in the past. Now she has founded Shift Focus, a school for cinema and life. And she has led transformational progress for more than 50,000 people as a life coach and is a strong voice for gender equality, empowering men and women to find a new equation to live in peace and harmony. And her autobiography, Freedom, Her Story, is an inspiring recount of her life in films. So there's a lot, we have very short time, but there's a lot for you all to hear. Dr. Lakshmi will be in conversation with Aruna. So do please listen in, and hopefully, if we can't take questions here, we'll take some outside. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
thanks. Yeah. So, Aruna ji, my question to you is, you've heard the presentation. We've also been talking about what we are seeing when we do this study. What is it that comes to your mind? I mean, you've started working for the past 50 years, you're in this industry. Tell us, what did you think about it?
Yes, it's more than 50 years. And I was the first girl. It was not easy at all. I mean, surrounded by men and completely male dominated, and the whole attitude was, what can she do? She's a girl after all. She can't do anything. Just look at you and watch your behavior, watch your body, eye candy. That was the kind of experience. And one of my early films, when something went wrong, they said, we knew this, first of all, they had a problem with even Film Institute. Honey, filmmaking can't be taught, was the conversation. And on top of it, a girl has come. So I had to work, I don't know how many 100,000 times more to prove that I knew my job. And that's what I did. And gradually, I kept expanding the space. When they realized, my team and people around, that this girl knows her job, they began to trust me. And I had to earn my stripes, earn merit as I went along. So it was very hard. Even today, the conversation has not changed all that much. I'm very sad and sorry to say that hardly 10% of technicians, or maybe writers, there are more writers, but if you take the cinematographers, editors, other people, hardly anybody, very, very few. And then also, people hesitate to give them big budgets, mainstream films. And if you want to make a mainstream film as a woman, then you have to do what the mainstream films do. Have lots of item numbers and do whatever else. And we do have mainstream women directors. And they also end up, or have to end up, toeing the line for whatever reasons, maybe out of choice, maybe out of compulsion. But you are pushed into a corner.
So in this presentation, we did talk about, being boxed in and, women scriptwriters being asked to change their scripts and as directors, being questioned all the time about your craft. Did you find this very surprising?
But it happens, I've seen it happen. Though, I think people realize when they get me to make a film, they do realize I have a mind of my own and I will fight for what I want to fight for. Sometimes I'm fighting for a dialogue. Sometimes I'm fighting for a shot not to be cut, censor board, or sometimes a producer or somebody else. Or I've even fought with an actor. Now, surprising, I don't want to mention the name of that. In one of my films, it was a woman-oriented, I make a lot of woman-oriented films. And the climax, of course, ends with the man accepting the woman, whatever she is. And the man said, I don't think this should be the end. Hello, I've given you the script, we have rehearsed the scene, and you're telling me now the emphasis should be on the man, how sacrificing is it, he accepts a woman like whatever, blah, 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 or whatever. No, she's very happy doing what she's done, and she's not regretful, but at the same time, she's sorry that she had to do what she had to do to understand herself, her own body, her own feelings, her own, whoever she is. And it was her self-discovery. So that was actually, I'm talking about my latest film. So I said, I'm sorry, but this is not going to happen. You knew it beforehand. And so you have to sometimes fight for every, as editors, we work to the precision of 1/24th of a second. Sometimes you have to fight for one frame also. So it's like that.
So, what is your take on whether you would want to be called as a director or a woman director? Or do you have these hats that you wear at different points? Sometimes you say, I'm a woman director, and sometimes you say, I'm a director. When do you do this?
I
and how
do
you
both. Actually, I do both. It's become so natural to say I'm a woman director because people don't think. You won't believe it. A very famous critic. Now he's very big and famous, but it was in his early days. He came to interview me and he thought I was a man. Hello? You've come to me and my film has been released. You've come, you don't even know, you haven't even done your homework. You thought only men can be directors or what? Where were you? Where are you coming from? So, and when he came, he was quite shocked to see that it was not a man, but he was a woman he was meeting. Of course, now he's become very famous. But this is the funny part, because people find it so hard to accept that women have brains, women have talent, women can do anything, almost anything that, maybe everything that men can do. But it's not about competition. It's about giving space. It's about accepting, acknowledge women, because women have some other stories to tell. Women have something more to, contribute. So if you take them along, understand them, I think your own life, people, even the audiences, I will say, your own lives will be richer because you have seen something that you didn't see before.
Do audience have any questions? We can take a couple of questions and then close before
Yes.
4. Yes. Somebody is going with the mic. Yeah.
Take 2 questions, please. One male and one female.
Hello. Hello, ma'am. I'm Anusha. I'm from Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communication. My question is about female gaze. We've studied Laura Mulvey, and we know that the point of male gaze is that a lot of women as audiences identify with the male character because that's how the narratives are formed. But a lot of films today, in the name of female gaze and under the garb of female gaze, actually just present their women to do what men do, while completely reversing the narrative and objectifying men in a female view. And they just basically make women look at men the way men look at women, and that isn't really female gaze at all. So a lot of movies basically just show women as being men all over again, and that's what they sell in the name of female gaze.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you that, female gaze is not the reverse of male gaze, number one. Secondly, when the male gaze was happening, even we women were conditioned to look at women like men. What were we watching? We were also watching women's bodies, but we were watching it like men watch. Because there were images thrust upon us. There's the images we grew up with, and we were watching that, and that became part of how a woman is represented. And that's what the big damage, I think, that got done to even the way women see things. But only, I think, with education and exposure, we began to understand that, that's not what who we are. We are not just bodies to be, represented and looked at by men and women, because there is voyeurism in society. There is voyeurism as far as men and women are concerned. It's a natural thing to look and appreciate whatever. But that's not all there is. So female gaze is really more about, understanding women, projecting women, also looking for a balance between the equality, gender equality, and also having women having agency, which is a very, very critical part. Women having agency in the film, in what they are doing, and even the people behind the camera. Because I say film is very transparent. If a woman is making a film, there are men who make women-centric films. Sometimes they do. And but they reveal themselves because the way they have portrayed the woman's story, you can make out whether he believes what he's saying or he's just putting it up and actually he's just another MCP. So you can make out. And that's what happens a lot of the times in Bollywood commercial blockbusters. They make big statements about making women's film, and you see they don't believe anything about that. Yeah. Yes, there's a lady over there.
No, I just also want to add, let's not demolish everything that goes in the name of female gaze, because definitely the female gaze brings in a lot more critical perspectives on how we are looking at the world and the society and the families. So topics that have been considered as, something that's part of our Indian culture which should not be criticized or interrogated, women bring in those and interrogate them, and they bring in the feminist lens, if you don't want to use the word gay, say the feminist lens and the feminist perspective. And I think that's really opening up our conversations on things that we never thought were important, whether it was sexuality, motherhood, etc. So I think while we may look at everything, take things with a pinch of salt, let's not demolish the concept that's coming from what women are bringing to the table and also what women-centric films are also doing.
Because she's absolutely right, because it involves much more than what you see on the screen. There's everything. It's the whole world, in a way. Where you're surrounded, it's your whole life. And all the nitty-gritty things that go into life and the perspective that you bring to that, I think, eventually.
There's, I think, one more question. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir. It is women's world. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, I have two quick questions. One is, he mentioned a little about Bechdel test. I would like to know a little more about that. And the second one is, for the nasty audiences, we have schools for teaching filmmaking, for watching films, and for, he also spoke about the social media stars, star critics, Kusha Kapila and Bishwa Kalyan and all that. So is there any school for learning how to watch a film in an intelligent way?
Sure, of course. I'll tell you something. I mean, almost all the colleges today have a film appreciation course. The Film Institute itself here has film appreciation courses. I mean, a lot of schools have film appreciation courses, short courses, long courses, and I've myself led film appreciation courses. It's a very, very critical thing. It's like, you hear classical music, you hear pop music, you cultivate taste. Because if you've only grown up on Bollywood blockbusters or a certain kind of formula cinema or something like that, you don't know what else is there. But when you look at something, you begin to understand the wider spectrum, understand different kind of expression. When you look at film movements all the world over, you begin to understand this different. It's, so this is culturally growing up in that world, in that art form, so to say, because cinema is also at one level is art. It's art, it's communication, and it's much more.
Yeah, about the Bechdel test, basically it's a test to say, every time you see two women on the screen, are they talking about themselves, their lives and their experiences, or are they talking about men? So very often you'll find two women on the screen, but they're talking about the boyfriend, they're talking about the husband, about the father. So when you test that and check, use that and check, and you find most of the time they're not talking about themselves, it means it doesn't make sense to just have women there because they're not talking about themselves. It continues to be about men. So therefore it fails the Bechdel test. But it's seen as something that's still okay to start with, but has its own limitations. Okay? Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir. We give it back to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you for
Okay, thank you very much for your absolutely very patient and wonderful listening to the whole thing very carefully with all the speakers. And thank you very much, all the speakers. You're all wonderful. And I felt a little bit here because, I made a film like Umberta about 40 years ago, and I was thinking that 40 years ago I solved the problems of the women. There was a male ego. But after that, I never, because I had two daughters of that. So I changed my whole perspective. But today, I must admit, Rob, thank you very much for this. You both of you from the consulate, American consulate. It was really wonderful for us. And I think this is a more elaborate subject. I feel sometimes when American consulate must take at least 2 days. I request you to have 2 days of subject to elaborate, showing some films and also have some more discussion on this. And it should happen in Pune.
I can do a whole course for you.
Yeah.
A whole 20-day course for you.
Yes, and then it will be
in all cities.
An yearly activity related to films and the whole making films and watching films and gender bias and all that. So Pune International Film Festival will definitely be with you. They have 2 days in sometimes in next few months, and we can plan some films, very important films which Aruna feels, and 2 days we can see. We'll do it about and we'll get it. Yeah, really, I feel so. I feel so. Yeah, we have something to offer. We are running very, short time. So this is a kind of a token from Pune International Film Festival, Aruna.
Thank you.
And one to Lakshmi. And if I'm short, okay, we have all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, and Rob, right. अरे अपनी लड़की को दे दो. अच्छा, we will definitely pass on to है ना, देना. Sir. Thank you so much. Sir, and thank you very much. Really, you were all wonderful. And thank you. Thank this girl. She's been responsible. Come on now. She's a great associate of Raw from American Consulate. Okay, so I thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry we were short of time. It could perhaps go for 2 hours, 3 hours, and 4 hours. But it was all wonderful. Give a big hand to the team.